Ah yes, survival horror. You might have heard of it. It's a term used to describe a horror game which puts the player into a tense and spooky situation and forced to survive against the monsters, spirits, or even walking animatronics with very little to no resources whatsoever. But survival horror is not just about how a developer can spook the player, but also how much information is being presented to that said player. Just like Jaws, Steven doesn't straight away reveal the antagonist of the film. He lets the audience build up preconceptions in their heads of what this killer shark is going to look like. And for most of the movie, we're just given little subtle hints, clues, and first-person perspective from Bruce the shark, but never a full-on face reveal until the halfway mark of the movie. By keeping Jaws hidden in this sense, this allows for suspense to be built, and this applies to survival horror's forgotten feature. What is survival horror's forgotten feature? It's fixed camera angles. Fixed camera angles deliberately fucks with your head and only shows you as much as the camera, or what I like to dub the director, wants to show you. So you can never truly see what is behind a corner or down a long dark corridor, since the fixed camera angle will only show you what it wants you to see, until of course you move the character and then the fixed camera angle will change perspective. In this sense, the developers can hide things from the player, and in this case of Resident Evil, hiding zombies in the level design itself incentivizes the player to take precautions. And from a narrative perspective, the fixed camera angle is a metaphor of how the player is just an active participant in the story, but is not really entirely in control of the situation, and is not even being presented in their perspective, but from a second person's perspective. This is not just an aesthetic feature of Resident Evil, but it is this form of restrictive gameplay that makes sure that the player is on edge and tense at all times. Hence, the restrictive nature of the fixed camera angle is all about building suspense, just like Steven Spielberg's Jaws. But ever since Resident Evil 4 and its upcoming remake, this unique perspective was kind of dropped entirely for a third-person perspective instead. And while third-person perspective has its advantages, such as putting the player more in the shoes of the protagonist, and this time completely devoiding the player of seeing what's behind their back, its implementation in later RE titles had sealed away a forgotten feature that was once what made Resident Evil unique to the survival horror genre. Fixed camera angles is not always about making the game more cinematic, but it also allows for the player to see things that would otherwise not be possible if it was either in first or third, such as this camera angle here, which is actually the perspective of the security camera positioned in the cell where you find either Chris or Jill, depending on which character you choose at the start of the game. And this creates an ominous feeling to it, making the audience pose the question, who is exactly behind that camera, and who is thereby watching our movements throughout the entire mansion? Fixed camera angles are definitely the byproduct of survival horror's early days, but in my opinion it still has an important place within the gaming horror niche, and if such a unique gameplay experience would never be revived again, well, for me it would always be, in my mind, survival horror's forgotten feature.